Chapter 1. The Unexpected Guests. Carson eased his truck down the gravel driveway, headlights slicing through the December dusk. The familiar silhouette of his two-bedroom home came into view, chimney puffing lazy curls of smoke into the cold air. He frowned. He hadn't left the fireplace going. His first instinct was to reach for his phone and call the sheriff's office. Out here, a few miles from the nearest neighbor, unexpected lights meant trouble. But then he hesitated. His siblings had a knack for surprise visits, and the last thing he wanted was to sick law enforcement on family. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of winter. The pond behind the house was a dark mirror, rimmed with frost. Sugar, his orange tabby, would be curled up inside, probably plotting world domination, or at least ownership of every fish he caught. Kevin stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and walked to the porch. Warm light spilled from the windows. The door was unlocked. That was strike two. He pushed it open slowly. Three faces turned toward him, wide-eyed and frozen like deer in headlights. A woman, late 20s, maybe early 30s, sat cross-legged on the rug in front of the fireplace. Two small children huddled close to her, clutching sandwiches on paper plates. Kevin blinked. They blinked back. "Well," he said finally, voice calm but carrying enough weight to fill the silence. "This is new." The woman's arms tightened around the kids. Fear flickered in her eyes, raw and unguarded. Kevin saw it, and something in him softened. "I'm Kevin," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "You're clearly not here to rob me. Sandwiches aren't exactly high-end loot." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Look," he continued, keeping his tone easy. "I'm not angry, just curious. How about I make some tea, and you tell me what's going on?" She hesitated, then nodded once, sharp, like a soldier conceding ground. Kevin moved to the kitchen, the familiar rhythm of filling the kettle grounding him. Behind him, the woman murmured something to the kids, then rose and followed, cautious as a stray cat. Up close, he noticed details. Hair pulled into a messy knot, jeans worn at the knees, a sweater that had seen better days. Her eyes, hazel, tired but defiant, met his briefly before skittering away. "I'm not in the habit of breaking into houses," she said finally, voice low but steady. "Good to know," Kevin replied, setting mugs on the counter. "So what happened?" She exhaled, a sound that carried weeks of weight. "My parents threw me out. I was staying with them after my ex decided he was moving to California to become a surfer." Kevin raised an eyebrow. She gave a short, bitter laugh. "The idiot didn't even know how to swim." Kevin chuckled despite himself. "Sounds like a solid plan." Her smile was fleeting, but it was there, a crack in the armor. "I didn't know where else to go," she continued. "I saw the house. It looked empty. I thought maybe just for a night." Kevin glanced toward the living room. "You cleaned." She flushed. "I didn't want you to think I was stealing. We used paper plates. Didn't touch your dishes." That mattered more than she knew. Kevin felt something shift, a quiet recognition. This wasn't recklessness. It was survival. He poured the tea and slid a mug toward her. "What's your name?" "Lena," she said softly. "Lena," he repeated, tasting the syllables. "Well, Lena, you're in a tough spot." Her chin lifted, defensive. "I'll leave. Tonight." Kevin shook his head. "No, you won't. It's freezing out there, and those kids need a roof." Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you being nice?" "Because," Kevin said simply, "I can see you're doing your best, and because I have an idea that might help both of us." Chapter 2. The Proposal. Kevin leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely as Lena wrapped her hands around the steaming mug. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft tick of the wall clock and the occasional pop from the fireplace in the next room. The kids, two tiny whirlwinds, were still in the living room, their voices a hushed murmur as they stacked paper plates like building blocks. Sugar had slinked out from her usual perch and was now sitting in the doorway, tail flicking with feline judgment. Her green eyes narrowed at the newcomers as if calculating how much chaos they'd bring to her kingdom. Kevin cleared his throat. "So, here's the thing," he began, his tone measured but warm. "I travel a lot for work, usually a week every month. When I'm gone, the house, well, let's just say it doesn't clean itself." Lena's brows knit. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," Kevin interrupted gently, "that I could use some help, and you could use a safe place for you and your kids. So, what if we make this official?" Her eyes widened. "Official?" "Yeah." He pushed away from the counter and opened a drawer, pulling out a notepad and pen. "A job. Live-in housekeeper. I'll pay you, file taxes properly so it counts toward your Social Security. No under-the-table nonsense." Lena stared at him like he'd just offered her a ticket to Mars. "You'd hire me?" Kevin shrugged. "Why not? You're already doing the work. The place looks cleaner than when I left." Her cheeks flushed. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," he said, holding up a hand. "You did what you had to do, and honestly, I respect that." She looked down at her tea, silent for a long moment. Kevin waited, letting the quiet stretch. He'd learned patience from years of fishing, Sometimes you just had to let the line sit. Finally, Lena spoke. I don't want charity. This isn't charity, Kevin said firmly. It's a job. You work, I pay. Simple. Her lips pressed into a thin line. What about boundaries? Kevin smiled faintly. You mean, am I some creep who's going to make this weird? Her gaze flicked up, wary. No, he said, voice steady. You'll have your own space. 2 bedrooms upstairs, one for you, one for the kids. I'm gone a lot, and when I'm here, I mostly keep to myself. You'll handle the house. Maybe keep an eye on Sugar, so she doesn't overthrow the government while I'm gone. As if on cue, Sugar let out a sharp meow, tail curling like punctuation. Lena's mouth twitched, almost a smile. She looks demanding. Kevin chuckled. She thinks she owns the pond. And me. Lena shook her head slowly. I don't know. Think about it, Kevin said, sliding the notepad toward her. I'll write down the basics. Pay hours, whatever you need. No pressure. She hesitated, then took the pen. Her fingers trembled slightly as she skimmed the notes he jotted down. Weekly pay, fair rate, flexible schedule, full use of kitchen, laundry, and utilities. Privacy respected. It was more than she'd hoped for, more than she'd dared imagine. What's the catch? She asked softly. Kevin met her eyes. No catch. Just help me keep the place running. That's all. The kids barreled into the kitchen then, breaking the fragile tension. The little boy, dark curls and wide eyes, held up Sugar like a trophy. Kitty, he announced proudly. Sugar's expression was pure betrayal. Kevin laughed. Careful, buddy. She's got claws and an ego. Lena swooped in, rescuing the cat from toddler tyranny. Sorry, she murmured, setting Sugar down gently. Sugar stalked off with a huff, tail high, dignity intact. Kevin grinned. See? You're already doing half the job. Lena looked at him, something shifting in her gaze, a flicker of hope tangled with caution. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. Kevin nodded, relief washing through him. Good. We'll make it work. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of logistics. Kevin showed her the upstairs rooms, explained the basics of the house, and introduced her to the quirks of Sugar, who, in turn, introduced herself by claiming the warmest spot on Lena's folded sweater. By the time the kids were tucked in and the house had settled into quiet, Kevin found himself standing by the window, staring out at the pond. The moon hung low, silvering the water. His half-built dock jutted like a promise into the dark. He wasn't sure what he'd just signed up for, but for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel empty. Chapter 3, Adjusting to New Norms. Kevin woke to the sound of laughter. For a split second, he thought he was dreaming. His house had never been that lively. Then came the unmistakable thud of small feet racing across hardwood, followed by Sugar's indignant yowl. He groaned, swung his legs out of bed, and padded to the doorway. Down the hall, the scene was chaos in miniature. 2 toddlers chasing each other in circles. Sugar perched on the arm of the couch like a queen under siege, tail flicking in outrage. Lena appeared from the kitchen, hair pulled back, wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans. She carried a plate of toast in one hand and a mug in the other, moving with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd been up for hours. Morning, Kevin said, voice rough with sleep. She glanced up, startled. Oh, sorry. Did we wake you? Kevin shrugged. Not exactly used to a morning soundtrack, but it's fine. The little boy, Eli, if Kevin remembered right, spotted him and froze mid-run. His sister, tiny and fierce, bumped into him and toppled over. Kevin crouched instinctively, scooping her up before the tears could start. Whoa there, he said gently, setting her on her feet. You okay? She blinked up at him, then grinned, a gap-toothed smile that hit him square in the chest. Lena's expression softened. That's Sophie. She's fearless. Kevin chuckled. I can see that. Sugar leapt down and strutted toward him, brushing against his leg with exaggerated dignity. Kevin bent to scratch behind her ears. You surviving girl? Sugar flicked her tail as if to say barely. Lena set the plate on the counter. I made extra toast if you want some. Kevin eyed the kitchen. It looked different. Not bad, just organized in a way that wasn't his. Spices lined up neatly, mugs stacked by size. His cupboards had clearly been rearranged. You've been busy, he said, grabbing a slice. She flushed. I thought it might help. I didn't mean to. Hey, Kevin interrupted, biting into the toast. Looks good. Better than my system, which was basically shove things where they fit. Her lips curved, a reluctant smile. The kids resumed their game, now involving a stuffed bear and what looked like Sugar's tail in their imagination. Kevin leaned against the counter, watching Lena move around the kitchen with quiet competence. So, he said casually, how's day one of the new gig? She hesitated. Strange. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Kevin frowned. What do you mean? People don't usually help. Not without wanting something. Kevin met her gaze, steady. I told you what I want. A clean house and someone to keep Sugar from staging a coup. That's it. Her eyes searched his, as if trying to find the hidden clause. Look, he added, softening his tone. I'm not here to make your life harder. If this works for you, great. If not, we figure something else out. She nodded slowly. It works. For now. The day unfolded in small, unexpected ways. Kevin spent the morning answering emails in his home office while Lena wrangled laundry and toddlers. Every so often, laughter drifted down the hall, bright, unfiltered, filling spaces that had long been silent. At lunch, Kevin found himself eating grilled cheese at the table with Eli and Sophie, who insisted on telling him elaborate stories about dragons and magic castles. Sugar sat nearby, glaring at the crumbs like they were a personal insult. You're good with them, Lena said quietly when the kids dashed off to the living room. Kevin blinked. Me? I just listened. That's more than most, she murmured almost to herself. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just smiled and reached for another sandwich. Later, Kevin stepped outside to check on the dock project. The half-built frame stretched over the pond like an unfinished thought. He grabbed his toolbox, intent on making progress, when Lena appeared at the door. Need help? She asked, arms crossed against the chill. Kevin raised an eyebrow. You know anything about docks? No, she admitted. But I learn fast. He grinned. Fair enough. Grab those boards. They worked side by side, the rhythm oddly companionable. Lena held planks steady while Kevin drilled, their conversation meandering from weather to favorite movies to the absurdity of her ex's surfing dream. At one point, Lena slipped on the frosty grass and let out a startled yelp. Kevin caught her arm, steadying her. For a heartbeat, they were close, too close, her breath visible in the cold air, her eyes wide. Got you, he said softly. She laughed, shaky but genuine. Guess I'm not cut out for construction. Kevin smiled, releasing her arm. You're doing fine. By dusk, the dock looked a little more like a dock and a little less like a pile of lumber. Kevin wiped his hands on a rag, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. Thanks, he said as they headed back inside. Lena shrugged. Least I could do. The kids were curled up on the couch, sugar wedged between them like a reluctant babysitter. Kevin paused, taking in the scene, the warmth, the quiet hum of life, and felt something he hadn't in years. Chapter 4, Dock Dreams and Shared Effort. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, sunlight glinting off the frost that rimmed the pond like a silver frame. Kevin stood on the back porch, coffee steaming in his hand, staring at the half-built dock. It looked like a stubborn puzzle missing half its pieces. He'd planned to finish it before winter set in, but life and work had a way of rearranging priorities. Now, with Lena and the kids under his roof, the project felt less like a solitary hobby and more like something that could anchor this new, unexpected chapter of his life. Thinking deep thoughts? Kevin turned to find Lena stepping outside, bundled in a thick sweater, her breath puffing in the cold air. She carried a mug of tea, fingers curled around it like it was a lifeline. Just wondering if this thing will ever look like a dock, he said, nodding toward the skeletal frame jutting over the water. She tilted her head, studying it. Looks ambitious, Kevin chuckled. That's a polite way of saying it looks like a mess. Her lips curved. I didn't say that. You thought it, he teased, then gestured toward the pile of lumber stacked nearby. I was planning to work on it today. You're welcome to join the chaos. Lena hesitated, then shrugged. Why not? Beats folding laundry. They spent the next hour hauling boards and tools down to the pond. The kids, bundled in puffy jackets, toddled after them like miniature foremen, offering unsolicited advice in the form of giggles and pointing. Sugar followed too, tail high, clearly convinced this was an inspection tour of her domain. Kevin knelt by the frame, tightening bolts while Lena held the plank steady. You ever built anything before? He asked. Does a bookshelf count? She replied, bracing the wood with surprising strength. Depends, Kevin said, glancing up with a grin. Did it stay upright? Mostly. He laughed, the sound carrying across the still water. Then you're hired. They fell into an easy rhythm. Kevin drilling, Lena handing him screws, the kids ferrying small tools back and forth like eager assistants. Every so often, Lena's laughter bubbled up, light and unguarded, and Kevin found himself smiling without thinking. By midday, the sun had softened the frost, and the dock looked promising. Not finished, but no longer a sad skeleton. Kevin straightened, stretching his back. Not bad, he said, surveying their progress. Lena wiped her hands on her jeans. It's starting to look like something. Something that won't collapse when I step on it, Kevin agreed. She grinned, then glanced toward the pond. Ever take the boat out? Sometimes, he said. Rowing clears my head. Sounds nice. Kevin studied her for a moment. The way the sunlight caught in her hair, the quiet strength in her posture, and felt an unexpected tug in his chest. He looked away, busying himself with the toolbox. The kids had grown restless. Their attention span for construction officially expired. Eli tossed pebbles into the water while Sophie tried to coax Sugar onto the dock. Sugar, unimpressed, flicked her tail and retreated to a sunny patch of grass. Think they're ready for lunch, Lena said, gathering stray tools. Yeah, Kevin replied, hefting the last board into place. Thanks for the help. Seriously. She shrugged, but her smile lingered. Least I could do. Back inside, the house hummed with warmth and the smell of grilled cheese. Lena moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, while Kevin hovered awkwardly, unsure if he should help or stay out of the way. You know, he said, leaning against the counter. You didn't have to cook. I wanted to, she replied simply, flipping a sandwich. You've been out there all morning. Kevin watched her for a beat, then nodded. Fair enough. The kids barreled in, cheeks pink from the cold, and clambered onto chairs. Sugar followed at a regal pace, leaping onto her usual perch with a look that said finally, the peasants are feeding me. Kevin chuckled. She's going to start demanding her own plate. She already did, Lena said dryly, sliding a sandwich onto a plate. Lunch was noisy and imperfect and good. Kevin found himself laughing at Eli's dramatic retelling of a pebble splash and Sophie's insistence that Sugar was secretly a dragon. Lena laughed too, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and for a moment, Kevin felt something shift, a quiet warmth settling in his chest. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew this. The house didn't feel empty anymore. Chapter 5. A trip away. Kevin stared at the suitcase lying open on his bed, half-packed with shirts and travel-sized toiletries. He hated this part, the ritual of leaving. It wasn't the work. He liked his job well enough. It was the disruption, the sense of stepping out of his own life for a week and hoping it would still be there when he returned. This time, though, the feeling was different. For years, his departures had been quiet affairs, Sugar watching from the dresser with her usual disdain, the house settling into silence the moment the door clicked shut. Now, laughter drifted up from downstairs, punctuated by the clatter of toys and Lena's voice calling out something about snack time. Kevin zipped the suitcase and exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure why his chest felt tight. Downstairs, Lena was crouched by the coffee table, wiping peanut butter off Sophie's chin, while Eli narrated an epic tale involving dinosaurs and spaceships. Sugar lounged nearby, tail flicking lazily, as if unimpressed by the chaos. Kevin cleared his throat. Hey! Lena looked up, her smile quick but a little guarded. All packed. Almost. He leaned against the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets. I'll be gone about a week. Should be back late Friday. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Okay. I left my number on the fridge, he added. If anything comes up, plumbing, heating, Sugar staging a coup, call me. That earned a small laugh. Got it. Kevin hesitated, then crouched to ruffle Eli's curls. You two behave, okay? Eli grinned. We will. Sophie held up a stuffed bear like a solemn oath. Kevin smiled, then straightened, his gaze flicking to Lena. You sure you're good with this? She met his eyes steady. I said I'd do the job. I'll do it. Something in her tone, firm, almost defensive, made him want to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he grabbed his suitcase and headed for the door. Sugar trotted after him, meowing like a tiny drill sergeant. I'll miss you too, Kevin muttered, scratching her head before stepping outside. The drive to the airport was uneventful, but Kevin's mind wasn't. He kept replaying the look on Lena's face, calm, but with an edge he couldn't quite name. Was she worried, resentful, or just tired? He shook the thoughts off as he boarded the plane, but they lingered like background noise. Back at the house, Lena stood in the doorway long after Kevin's truck disappeared down the road. The kids tugged at her hands, eager for attention, but her thoughts were tangled. She'd agreed to this arrangement because she had no choice. It was practical, safe. But now, with Kevin gone, the weight of responsibility pressed harder. This wasn't her home, not really. She was a guest with a job title, and the line between gratitude and discomfort blurred more every day. Still, she squared her shoulders. She'd keep the house running, keep the kids happy, and prove she wasn't a burden. The week unfolded in small, ordinary rhythms. Lena cleaned, cooked, and wrangled toddlers while Sugar supervised with imperial disdain. The cat developed a habit of curling up on Lena's lap during late-night tea, as if staking a claim. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Lena found herself staring out at the pond. The dock stood half-finished, its planks catching moonlight like pale bones. She imagined Kevin out there, working quietly, and felt an unexpected pang. A mix of curiosity and something softer she didn't want to name. Midweek, her phone buzzed. A known number. She answered cautiously. Hey! Kevin's voice came through, warm and familiar. Just checking in. Lena blinked, surprised. Oh, hi. How's everything? Fine, she said quickly. Kids are good. Sugar's opinionated. Kevin laughed. Sounds about right. There was a pause, not awkward but weighted. You okay? He asked finally. Lena hesitated. Yeah, just busy. Well, Kevin said, don't let her boss you around. Sugar thinks she runs the place. She might, Lena murmured, smiling despite herself. Kevin chuckled. I'll be back Friday. Save me some grilled cheese. I'll think about it, she teased, and the ease in her voice surprised her. When the call ended, Lena stared at the phone for a long moment, her heart doing something strange and inconvenient. Friday came, and with it, Kevin's return. He pulled into the driveway just after sunset, headlights sweeping across the frost-tipped grass. The house glowed warm against the winter dark, and for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of anticipation instead of relief. He stepped inside, suitcase in hand, and froze. The living room was spotless, the fireplace crackling, and the smell of something savory drifted from the kitchen. Eli and Sophie barreled toward him, squealing his name like he was a returning hero. Kevin laughed, dropping to his knees as they collided with his arms. Sugar sauntered in behind them, tail high, as if to say I kept things under control. And then Lena appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel, her smile small but real. "Welcome back," she said softly. Kevin's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with travel fatigue. Chapter 6: At a surprise dinner. Kevin stood in the doorway for a moment, suitcase forgotten at his side, taking in the scene. The house smelled like rosemary and butter, warm and inviting, a far cry from the usual takeout aroma that greeted him after trips. Eli and Sophie clung to his legs, chattering about everything he'd missed. A new drawing, a pebble collection, Sugar's latest act of rebellion, apparently involving a stolen sock. Kevin laughed, ruffling their hair, his heart unexpectedly full. Okay, he said, straightening. "Let me breathe before you tell me Sugar started a rock band." "She did," Sophie declared solemnly, clutching her bear. Kevin grinned. "I believe it." Sugar strutted past them, tail high, as if confirming the rumor. Then Lena appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Her hair was pulled back, a few strands escaping to frame her face, and her sweater looked soft and worn in a way that made Kevin's chest tighten. "Welcome back," she said, her voice calm but carrying something warmer beneath. Kevin cleared his throat. "Thanks. Smells amazing in here." Her lips curved. "I thought you might want a real meal after a week of airport food." Kevin blinked. "You cooked. Don't sound so shocked," she teased lightly, turning back toward the kitchen. "Come on, before the kids eat everything." The dining table was set, nothing fancy, just plates and mismatched glasses, but it felt intentional. A pot of stew steamed in the center, flanked by a basket of bread and a bowl of salad. Kevin sat, still a little dazed, as Lena ladled stew into bowls. Eli and Sophie dove in with the enthusiasm of tiny wolves. Sugar perched on a chair like an uninvited guest, eyeing the bread with predatory focus. Kevin took a bite and stopped. "This is incredible." Lena shrugged, but her cheeks pinked. "It's just stew." "It's not just stew," Kevin said, pointing his spoon at her. "This is the best thing I've eaten in weeks." Her smile flickered, quick and shy, before she busied herself with the bread basket. Dinner unfolded in a blur of laughter and crumbs. Eli launched into a dramatic retelling of Sugar's sock heist, complete with sound effects. Sophie insisted Kevin try her special salad, which turned out to be lettuce sprinkled with crushed crackers. Kevin played along, praising the culinary masterpiece until Sophie beamed like a queen. Lena laughed, the sound soft and genuine, and Kevin found himself watching her more than he meant to. How her eyes crinkled when she smiled, how she listened to the kids with full attention. For years, his dinners had been silent affairs, just him, a plate, and the hum of the fridge. This was different, and he liked it more than he wanted to admit. After the kids were tucked in and Sugar had claimed her throne on the couch, Kevin lingered in the kitchen, drying dishes while Lena wiped down counters. "You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly. "I wanted to," she replied, stacking plates. "You've been good to us. Felt right." Kevin hesitated, then set the towel down. "You don't owe me anything, Lena." Her gaze flicked up, steady and unreadable. "I know." For a moment, the air felt charged, something unspoken humming between them. Kevin wanted to say more, something about how the house felt different now, how he didn't mind the noise or the laughter. But the words tangled and he let them go. Instead, he smiled. "Thanks, for dinner." She nodded, her own smile small but real. "You're welcome." Later, in his room, Kevin sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase he hadn't unpacked yet. The house was quiet now but not empty, not in the way it used to be. And for the first time in a long while, he wondered if maybe he didn't want things to go back to the way they were. Chapter 7: The X returns. Saturday morning started like any other since Lena and the kids had moved in, quiet, then suddenly loud. Kevin was halfway through his first cup of coffee when Eli barreled into the kitchen wearing a superhero cape and announcing that Sugar was now his sidekick. Sugar, unimpressed, flicked her tail and leapt onto the counter, narrowly avoiding a collision with the toaster. Kevin chuckled, setting his mug down. "Careful, buddy. Sugar doesn't do capes. She does now," Eli declared, tugging at the cat's imaginary costume. Lena appeared then, hair damp from a quick shower, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that made Kevin's chest tighten for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely. She smiled faintly at the scene. "You're going to get scratched," she warned Eli, then glanced at Kevin. "Morning. Morning," he said, trying to sound casual. It was a good morning, warm, ordinary, the kind Kevin had started to crave without admitting it, which was why the knock at the door felt like a gunshot. Kevin frowned, setting his mug aside. "Expecting anyone?" Lena froze, color draining from her face. No. The knock came again, louder this time. Kevin crossed the room and opened the door, and found himself staring at a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a surf shop catalog. Sun-bleached hair, tan skin, a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey," the man said, leaning against the doorframe like he owned it. "You must be Kevin." Kevin's jaw tightened. "And you are Jason." The grin widened. "Lena's boyfriend." Kevin didn't move. "Ex-boyfriend, from what I heard." Jason shrugged. "Details." His gaze slid past Kevin, landing on Lena, who stood rigid in the kitchen doorway. "Hey babe." Lena's voice was flat. "Don't call me that." Jason laughed, easy and careless. "Come on, don't be like that. I drove all the way from California." Kevin stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "Why?" Jason's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. "To see my kids. And Lena, of course." Eli peeked around Kevin's leg, wide-eyed. Sophie clutched her bear, sensing the tension. Lena moved quickly, scooping Sophie into her arms. "You don't get to just show up," she said, her voice shaking now, not with fear, but anger. "You left, Jason. You made your choice." Jason spread his hands. "People change." Kevin's tone was calm, but steel threaded through it. "Not in my house, they don't." Jason's eyes narrowed. "What's your deal, man? You think you can play dad because you've got a big yard and a cat?" Sugar, as if on cue, leapt onto the windowsill and hissed, a sound so sharp it sliced through the tension like a blade. Kevin didn't flinch. "My deal is keeping this house safe. Lena and the kids are under my roof, and that means you don't get to barge in and start trouble." Jason's jaw worked, but he didn't step forward. "I just want to talk." "Then you can do it somewhere else," Kevin said evenly. "Not here. Not today." Lena's grip on Sophie tightened. "Jason, go." For a moment, Kevin thought Jason might push it, might try to force his way in. But then Jason's grin returned, brittle around the edges. "Fine, but this isn't over." He turned and walked to his car, the tires spitting gravel as he sped down the driveway. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Sugar's low, satisfied purr. Kevin closed the door and turned to Lena. Her face was pale, her eyes bright with something raw. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, but her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I didn't think he'd—" "Don't," Kevin said gently. "You don't have to apologize for his choices." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, Kevin wanted to cross the room, pull her into his arms, tell her she didn't have to carry this alone. But he didn't. Instead, he crouched to Eli's level. "You good, buddy?" Eli nodded solemnly. "Is he gone?" "Yeah," Kevin said. "He's gone." Sophie buried her face in Lena's shoulder, and Lena kissed her hair, whispering something Kevin couldn't hear. Later, after the kids were settled with cartoons and Sugar had resumed her throne on the couch, Lena stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. Kevin joined her, keeping a respectful distance. "He's not coming back," Kevin said quietly. Lena's laugh was bitter. "You don't know Jason." Kevin studied her profile, the tension in her jaw, the way her shoulders curved inward like she was bracing for impact. "Then we'll be ready if he does." She turned to him, eyes searching his. "Why are you doing this?" Kevin held her gaze. "Because you're here. Because they're here. And because I don't like bullies." Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, gratitude, something deeper she didn't name. "Thank you," she whispered. Kevin nodded, his chest tight. "Anytime." That night, after the kids were asleep and the house had settled into uneasy quiet, Kevin sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the moonlit pond. The dock waited, half-finished, like a metaphor he didn't want to unpack. He told himself this was temporary, a practical arrangement. But tonight, with Lena's voice still echoing in his head, he wasn't so sure anymore. Chapter 8, The Festival. The first snow had melted into a crisp winter chill by the time Lena mentioned the festival. Kevin was sanding a plank for the dock when she appeared on the porch, bundled in a navy coat, cheeks pink from the cold. "There's a winter festival in town tonight," she said, her voice casual but carrying a hint of hope. "Lights, music, food stalls. The kids would love it." Kevin looked up, brow furrowing. "Festival? Yeah." She hesitated, then added, "It might be good for them. For all of us." Kevin set the sander down, wiping his hands on a rag. Crowds weren't his thing. He liked quiet, the pond, the hum of his tools, Sugar's occasional judgmental stare. But Lena's eyes held something he couldn't ignore, a longing for normalcy, for a slice of life that didn't feel borrowed. "All right," he said finally. "Let's go." Her smile was quick, almost startled. "Really? Really?" Kevin said, grinning. "But if Sugar tries to come, she's staying in the truck." By dusk, the town square glowed like a jewel against the dark. Strings of lights crisscrossed above, casting warm halos over stalls selling cider and roasted chestnuts. Music drifted from a small stage where a local band played cheerful folk tunes. Eli and Sophie were wide-eyed, clutching Lena's hands as they took in the carousel, the candy stands, the towering Christmas tree at the center of it all. Kevin followed, feeling oddly out of place in his worn jacket and boots. But the kids' laughter tugged him forward. Look, Eli pointed at a booth stacked with gingerbread houses. Can we make one? Sure, Lena said, her voice bright. She glanced at Kevin. You in? Kevin raised an eyebrow. You want me to decorate cookies? I want you to try, she teased, eyes sparkling. Kevin sighed theatrically. Fine, but if my house collapses, I'm blaming the architect. They squeezed into the booth, aprons tied awkwardly around their coats. Eli attacked his gingerbread walls with icing like a tiny construction foreman, while Sophie focused on eating more candy than she used. Kevin stared at his kit like it was a foreign object. So, frosting is glue? Basically, Lena said, laughing as she piped neat lines along her roof. Kevin attempted the same, only to have his walls slide apart in slow motion. This is sabotage, he muttered. Lena leaned over, steadying the pieces with quick fingers. You're too heavy-handed. Story of my life? Kevin said dryly, but his lips curved when she smiled at him, close enough that he caught the faint scent of her shampoo, something clean and warm. For a moment, the noise of the festival faded, and it was just them, bent over a gingerbread house that refused to cooperate. Later, they wandered through the square, cups of hot cider warming their hands. The kids darted ahead, chasing bubbles from a street performer, their laughter ringing like bells. Kevin walked beside Lena, the glow of lights painting her face in soft gold. You were right, he said quietly. They needed this. She glanced at him, her smile gentle. So did you. Kevin chuckled. I'm not exactly a festival guy. Maybe not, she said, her gaze lingering on his. But you're good at showing up. The words settled deep, heavier than they sounded. Kevin looked away, watching Eli spin in circles, Sophie clapping her mittened hands. Thanks, he said finally, his voice low. As the night wound down, they found themselves near the big tree, its branches dripping with lights like frozen stars. Couples posed for photos, kids squealed over ornaments, and somewhere in the distance, the band struck up a slow tune. Lena stood beside him, her breath visible in the cold, her cheeks flushed. Kevin wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled. Instead, he offered his hand. Ready to head back? She hesitated, then slipped her fingers into his. Warm, steady. And for the first time, Kevin wondered if maybe this wasn't just about helping her. Maybe it was about something he'd been missing all along. Chapter 9, Misunderstandings. The festival glow lingered in Kevin's mind long after they returned home. He replayed the moment Lena's hand slipped into his. Warm, steady. Something that felt like more than gratitude. He'd wanted to hold on longer, to say something that mattered, but the kids had tugged her away, and the words stayed locked behind his teeth. Now, 2 days later, the house felt different. Not louder or quieter, just heavier, like the air had thickened with something unsaid. Kevin noticed it in small ways. Lena's smile didn't reach her eyes, her laughter sounded practiced, and she kept busy. Too busy. Scrubbing counters that were already clean, folding laundry twice. He told himself he was imagining it. Until that morning. Kevin was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when Lena walked in with a basket of clothes. Her hair was pulled back, her sweater soft and worn, but her posture was stiff, like she was bracing for impact. Morning, Kevin said, aiming for casual. Morning, she replied, her voice clipped. He frowned. Everything okay? Fine. She set the basket down with a thud that said otherwise. Kevin hesitated, then tried again. You've been quiet. Lena's hands stilled on a towel. I didn't realize I had to entertain you. The words hit harder than he expected. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Her tone was sharp now, brittle around the edges. Kevin stared at her, confusion knotting in his chest. I meant you seem upset. If I did something, you didn't. She cut in, too fast. This isn't about you. But her eyes told a different story, something wounded flickering there before she turned away. The kids barreled in then, breaking the tension with demands for cereal and cartoons. Kevin stepped back, letting Lena handle it, but the knot in his chest didn't loosen. He spent the rest of the morning outside, sanding planks for the dock, trying to work the frustration out of his muscles. The rhythm of the sander helped, but his thoughts kept circling back to her words. I didn't realize I had to entertain you. Where had that come from? Inside, Lena moved through the house like a ghost. She hated the sharpness in her voice earlier, hated the way Kevin's expression had shuddered. But the truth was, she was scared of wanting too much, of reading into things that weren't there. The festival had felt magical. For a moment, she'd let herself believe they were something more than two people bound by circumstance. But then reality crashed back. This was his house, his life, and she was just passing through. She couldn't afford to hope. Not when hope had burned her before. By evening, the silence between them had stretched thin and brittle. Kevin came in from the cold, dusting sawdust from his jacket, and found Lena at the sink, scrubbing a pan that didn't need scrubbing. Lena, he said quietly. She didn't look up. What? We need to talk. Her shoulders tensed. About what? About whatever this is, Kevin said, gesturing vaguely between them. Because I feel like I missed a memo. Lena set the pan down, water dripping from her fingers. There's nothing to talk about. Bull, Kevin said, his voice firm now. You've been avoiding me since the festival. If I crossed a line, you didn't, she said again, but softer this time. Then what? Her breath hitched, and for a moment, Kevin thought she might tell him, might spill the fear knotted in her chest. But then she shook her head, retreating behind a wall he couldn't see. Forget it, she whispered, and walked out. Kevin stood there, staring at the empty doorway, frustration simmering under his skin. He wasn't good at this, at feelings, at decoding silences. But he knew one thing. He didn't want to lose whatever fragile thing had started to grow between them. And yet, tonight it felt like he already had. Chapter 10 Sugar Saves the Day. The tension in the house had settled like a fog, thin but everywhere, clinging to every word left unsaid. Kevin felt it when he passed Lena in the hallway, when their conversations shrank to practical exchanges about groceries and laundry. Even the kids seemed to sense it, their laughter quieter, their glances darting between the two adults like they were waiting for something to break. And then Sugar decided to intervene. It started with a crash. Kevin was in his office, staring at a spreadsheet he couldn't focus on, when the sound of shattering glass jolted him upright. He bolted down the hall to find Lena kneeling on the kitchen floor, surrounded by shards of what used to be a vase. Sugar sat on the counter, tail flicking with smug satisfaction. I swear, Lena muttered, sweeping up pieces with a dustpan. This cat has a vendetta. Kevin crouched beside her, picking up a fragment. She's making a statement. Lena shot him a look. About what? About us, Kevin said, deadpan. She's tired of the silent treatment. Lena blinked, then laughed. A short, startled sound that cracked the tension like lightning. Kevin grinned. See? Sugar's a genius. She's a menace? Lena countered, but her smile lingered, softening the edges of her face. They worked together to clean up the mess, their movements easy, almost familiar. When Lena reached for a shard at the same time Kevin did, their fingers brushed. A fleeting touch, but enough to send a jolt through him. Sorry, she murmured, pulling back. Don't be, Kevin said quietly. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the silence no longer sharp but charged with something else, something that felt like possibility. Later, after the kids were in bed and Sugar had claimed her throne on the couch, Kevin found Lena in the living room, curled up with a blanket and a book. He hesitated in the doorway, then crossed to the armchair opposite her. Mind if I join? He asked. She glanced up, surprised. It's your house. Doesn't mean I want to sit alone, he said, settling in. Her lips curved, faint but real. Suit yourself. For a while, they sat in companionable quiet, the fire casting soft shadows across the room. Sugar stretched luxuriously, then leapt onto Kevin's lap without warning, nearly knocking his book to the floor. Guess I've been chosen, Kevin said dryly, scratching behind her ears. She likes you, Lena murmured. Kevin met her gaze over Sugar's head. So do I. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Simple, unvarnished, hanging in the air like a dare. Lena froze, her breath catching. Kevin. He leaned forward, voice low but steady. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you cleaned my kitchen. Maybe when you laughed at my terrible gingerbread house. But I like having you here. I like you. Her eyes shimmered, uncertainty and something warmer tangled together. This wasn't supposed to be. I know, he said, but it is. Sugar yawned, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, and Kevin almost laughed at the absurdity of confessing his feelings with a cat sprawled across his lap like a furry referee. Lena set her book aside, fingers twisting in the blanket. I'm scared, she admitted softly. Every time I trust someone, it falls apart. Kevin's chest tightened. I'm not him, Lena. I know, she whispered, and for the first time he believed she did. They didn't kiss, not yet. But when Lena smiled, small and trembling, and Kevin reached across the space to take her hand, it felt like the start of something real. And Sugar, queen of timing, purred like she'd planned it all along. Chapter 11. The dock completed. The dock had been waiting for weeks, half finished, jutting into the pond like a promise Kevin hadn't quite kept. But today, under a pale winter sun, he was determined to finish it. He hauled the last stack of planks down to the water, breath fogging in the cold air. The pond shimmered like glass, rimmed with frost, and the skeletal dock stretched out, patient and silent. Behind him, footsteps crunched on the frozen grass. You're really doing it? Lena said, her voice carrying a note of surprise, and something softer. Kevin glanced over his shoulder. She stood bundled in her coat, the kids trailing behind like curious ducklings. Sugar trotted at their heels, tail high, clearly convinced this was an inspection tour of her empire. Figured it was time, Kevin said, hefting a plank. Can't let winter win. Eli's eyes widened. Are we gonna ride the boat? Not today, Kevin said, smiling. But soon. They worked together just like before. Lena steadying boards while Kevin drilled, the kids ferrying screws and pretending they were pirates. Sugar supervised from the shore, her expression pure feline disdain. The rhythm felt easy, almost comforting. Kevin found himself stealing glances at Lena, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her laughter bubbling up when Sophie declared herself captain of the dock. When the last plank slid into place, Kevin straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. There, he said, surveying the finished structure. Not bad, huh? Lena smiled, her eyes bright. It's beautiful. Kevin chuckled. It's a dock. It's more than that, she said softly, and for a moment, her gaze held his steady warm, full of something that made his chest tighten. The kids clamored to test it, so Kevin led the way, boots thudding on the new boards. The dock held firm, solid underfoot. Eli and Sophie squealed, racing to the edge, while Sugar perched like a queen on the first plank, tail curling in approval. Kevin turned to Lena, offering his hand. Come on. She hesitated, then slipped her fingers into his. Warm, familiar. They walked to the end together, the pond stretching out like a sheet of silver. Kevin imagined the rowboat bobbing there, imagined quiet mornings with coffee and laughter instead of silence. Feels good, he said quietly. Lena nodded, her smile trembling at the edges. It does. When the kids finally tired of their pirate game and Sugar stalked back to the house, Kevin lingered on the dock with Lena, the cold air sharp but the moment soft. You know, he said, voice low, I built this to have a place to think, to be alone. And now? She asked. Kevin looked at her, really looked, and felt the truth settle like an anchor. Now I don't want to be. Her breath caught, visible in the winter air. Kevin. He squeezed her hand gently. Don't answer yet. Just stay. And she did. Chapter 12, Confession. The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that felt deliberate, like everyone had settled into their corners to let the day breathe. The kids were asleep upstairs, Sugar curled in her usual spot on the couch, tail flicking lazily as if she owned the silence. Kevin stood by the window, staring out at the pond. The dock gleamed faintly under the moonlight, solid and complete, a promise fulfilled. He'd thought finishing it would feel like closure, but instead, it felt like a beginning, and that terrified him almost as much as it thrilled him. Behind him, Lena's footsteps were soft against the hardwood. You're still up, she said, her voice gentle but carrying a question beneath. Kevin turned, his breath catching at the sight of her, hair loose, sweater draped like a second skin, eyes shadowed with something he couldn't name. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Too much on my mind. She hesitated, then crossed the room, stopping a few feet away. About the dock? Kevin smiled faintly. About everything. For a moment neither spoke. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting the room in amber shadows. Sugar stretched, yawned, and leapt down, padding toward the kitchen like a queen dismissing her court. Kevin took a breath, steadying himself. Lena, I need to say something. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the blanket she carried. Okay. I didn't plan this, he began, voice low but sure. When I found you here that night, I thought it was temporary, a way to help until you got back on your feet. But somewhere along the way, he paused, searching for words that didn't sound like a script. I started looking forward to coming home, to hearing the kids laugh, to seeing you. Her eyes shimmered, uncertainty and hope tangled together. Kevin, I like you, he said simply. Not because you needed help, not because you're here, because you're you. The silence that followed was heavy, but not sharp, more like the pause before a song begins. Lena's breath hitched, her gaze dropping to the floor, then lifting to meet his. You don't know what you're asking, she whispered. I'm not asking for anything, Kevin said softly. I'm telling you how I feel. Her lips trembled. Every time I trust someone, it falls apart. Jason, I'm not Jason, Kevin said, his voice firm but gentle. I'm not going anywhere. Lena closed her eyes, fighting the war inside her, the part that wanted to believe and the part that feared the cost. When she opened them, tears glimmered like stars. I'm scared, she admitted. Kevin stepped closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wild creature that might bolt. So am I, he said. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Her laugh was shaky, breaking on a sob she tried to swallow. You're terrible at speeches. Kevin grinned, relief flooding his chest. Yeah, well, I'm better at building docks. That earned a real laugh, soft and bright, and Kevin felt something inside him loosen, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. He reached out, his hand hovering for a heartbeat before she let him take hers. Warm, trembling, real. Stay, he said quietly. Not because you have to, because you want to. Lena's fingers curled around his, and when she whispered, I do, it felt like the world exhaled. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But when she leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it, Kevin knew this wasn't a beginning anymore. It was home. Chapter 13, a new chapter. The first day of the new year dawned clear and bright, sunlight spilling across the frost-tipped grass like a quiet blessing. Kevin stood on the back porch, coffee warming his hands, watching the pond shimmer under a pale winter sky. The dock stretched out solid and sure, no longer a half-finished dream but a promise kept. a promise that meant more now than he'd ever imagined. Behind him, the door creaked open. Lena stepped out, bundled in a soft coat, her hair catching the light like spun gold. She smiled when she saw him, a smile that reached her eyes this time, and Kevin felt something inside him settle. "Morning," she said, her voice gentle but bright. "Morning," Kevin replied, his grin slow and easy. "Sleep okay?" She nodded, tugging the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Better than I have in months." Kevin's chest warmed at that, but before he could say more, the kids barreled out like twin whirlwinds, Eli clutching a plastic sword and Sophie dragging her stuffed bear by one ear. "Dock time," Eli announced, his voice ringing across the yard. Kevin laughed. "You heard the captain. Let's go." The dock groaned under the weight of boots and tiny sneakers as they marched toward the edge. Sugar trotted behind them, tail high, clearly convinced this was her kingdom and everyone else was trespassing. Kevin helped the kids into the rowboat, steadying it as it rocked gently against the new planks. Sophie squealed with delight, clutching her bear like a life preserver, while Eli declared himself commander of the pond. "Careful," Lena warned, hovering near the edge. "They're fine," Kevin said, his voice calm but warm. "I've got them." He glanced at her then, catching the way her eyes softened as she watched him. Steady, sure, the kind of man who didn't run when things got hard. When the kids were settled, Kevin turned to Lena, offering his hand. "Come on." She hesitated, then slipped her fingers into his, and together they stepped into the boat. It rocked gently, the pond rippling like liquid silver. Kevin pushed off, the oars dipping into the water with smooth, practiced strokes. The world felt quiet out there, just the creak of wood, the soft splash of oars, and the laughter of children echoing across the stillness. Lena sat opposite him, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her eyes bright with something that looked a lot like hope. "This is beautiful," she murmured. Kevin smiled, his breath fogging in the crisp air. "It's better with company." Her lips curved, and for a moment, the silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, rich, humming with everything they hadn't said but both understood. Sugar, of course, refused to be left behind. With a leap that defied physics, she landed in the boat, tail flicking like a banner of triumph. "Seriously," Kevin muttered, steadying the boat as Lena laughed, a sound so bright it made his chest ache in the best way. "She's claiming the best seat," Lena teased, watching Sugar curl up on the bow like a queen surveying her domain. Kevin shook his head, grinning. "Figures. She's been running this place since day one." They drifted across the pond, the winter sun painting the water in shades of gold and silver. Eli pointed out imaginary sea monsters, Sophie sang to her bear, and Sugar purred like the engine of a tiny ship. Kevin let the oars rest for a moment, his gaze locking with Lena's across the boat. "You know," he said quietly, "I built this dock so I could have a place to think, to be alone. And now?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Kevin smiled, slow and certain. "Now I want it to be crowded." Her laugh was shaky, breaking on a breath that sounded suspiciously like relief. "You're terrible at romantic lines." "Yeah," Kevin said, grinning, "but I'm good at keeping promises." When they reached the far edge of the pond, Kevin anchored the boat and sat back, watching the kids chatter and Sugar bask in the sun. Lena leaned against the side, her hand brushing his, and this time, neither of them pulled away. It wasn't a grand gesture, no sweeping kiss under fireworks, just two people sitting in a boat, hands tangled, hearts steady. But for Kevin, it felt like everything. And when Lena whispered, "I think we're going to be okay," he believed her. The laughter carried across the water, mingling with the soft creak of wood and the purr of a cat who had, as always, claimed the best seat. Home wasn't quiet anymore, and Kevin wouldn't have it any other way. Epilogue. Spring on the dock. The first warm breeze of spring swept across the pond, rippling the water like silk. Kevin sat on the dock he'd built months ago, legs stretched out, a mug of coffee cradled in his hands. The air smelled of thawed earth and budding leaves, a promise of green after the long winter. Behind him, laughter floated from the yard. Eli was chasing bubbles with the same reckless joy he'd had in December, while Sophie toddled after him, clutching her ever-faithful bear. Sugar lounged in a patch of sunlight, tail flicking lazily, her kingdom secure. Kevin smiled, watching Lena spread a blanket near the edge of the dock. She wore a soft blue dress today, her hair loose and shining in the sun. When she glanced up and caught his gaze, her smile was slow and certain, the kind that still managed to knock the breath out of him. "Coffee hog," she teased, nodding at his mug. Kevin grinned, holding it out. "Trade for a kiss?" Her laugh was bright, carrying across the water. "You're shameless." "Efficient," he corrected, and when she leaned down to press her lips to his, Sugar let out a dramatic yowl as if protesting the lack of attention. Kevin chuckled against Lena's mouth. "Jealous much?" "She thinks she started this," Lena murmured, settling beside him. "She probably did," Kevin said, sliding an arm around her shoulders. "Smart cat." Life wasn't perfect, not in the glossy magazine cover way. There were bills and work trips and nights when the kids refused to sleep. But it was good. Solid. Real. Kevin had learned that home wasn't about quiet or control. It was about laughter echoing down hallways, about tiny fingerprints on windows, about someone waiting on the porch when you came back from a long trip. And Lena? She'd stopped looking over her shoulder. The fear that once shadowed her eyes had faded, replaced by something steady and bright. She was building a life again. Not alone this time, but with someone who showed up and stayed. "Doc looks good," Lena said softly, her gaze sweeping over the sturdy planks. Kevin squeezed her hand. "It's better with company." She smiled, leaning into him as the kids' laughter rang out like bells. Sugar stretched luxuriously, claiming the sunniest spot on the dock, the best seat, as always. Kevin kissed Lena's temple, his voice low but sure. "You know, I built this to have a place to think. And now?" she asked, her tone playful but her eyes warm. Kevin smiled, slow and certain. "Now I don't want to think at all." The pond shimmered, the breeze whispered through the trees, and for the first time in years, Kevin felt like every piece of his life had clicked into place. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Home wasn't quiet anymore, and he wouldn't have it any other way.